Hey, welcome to the Glen Gauer podcast, the best podcast you'll listen to all day. Sponsored by Mission Blueprint. Hey, welcome back to the show, everybody. Hope you had a great week. Say, last Thursday, I did a show on the movie Father Stu. Now, if you haven't seen the movie, I highly recommend you go. It's a movie about a young man's desire to get married, even so much he decided he'd get baptized for her. And he did. Well, then something happened at the moment of baptism that began to change his life. Now, there's a little bit of controversy about the movie regarding some of the language and maybe some of the inappropriateness. So I wanted to get a few observations from someone who's been to the movie. So today we welcome Clark to the show all the way from Cowboy Country, a member of the Football Hall of Fame from Black Hills State College. Clark, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am well. How are you, Glenn?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Let's get right into the movie. What's your initial reaction to the movie, Father Stu?
I felt the movie was liturgically strong, and especially in concerning confession, the rite of reconciliation. I think that it exposed the beauty of that sacrament very well. And I think that was the entire underlying theme of the entire movie, that it was very eye-opening, I think, especially to non-Catholics, is who I would direct it at. So, but I thought it was liturgically strong and showed the Catholic Church for the beauty that it is.
So you believe the underlying theme was forgiveness?
Yeah.
Excellent. As you were watching the movie, like most of us watch movies, sometimes there's one part that strikes to the heart. What part of the movie was that for you, and why?
As the movie progresses, there's a lot of things, and I think a lot of people focus near the end when he is ordained. But I think, and who knows if it was true, but I can't imagine that there wasn't some sort of spiritual appearance that after his motorcycle accident that Mary did appear to him. And whether he knows it or not, or whether it actually happened in his eyes or not, I think there's a spiritual thing, because she said, "You will not die." And I think he understood from that he had a purpose in life, and he knew exactly what it was from that. So I would say when Mary appeared to him after the accident, that is what I would say was significant for me.
Granted, this was a movie. It was based on a true story.
Right.
Is that part of the story accurate? Have you done any reading or research on that?
I have not. So, but as a Catholic, do I believe that it can happen? Yeah, I do, And as far as the movie, because we know they take license and stuff, but I think that was appropriately displayed that way, because it would have an impact, and if we believe the rest of Father Stu's life the way it ended up, I can't help believe that something like this influenced him.
One of the big surprises for me is 32 years ago, I had a situation where I decided to begin practicing Christianity. I grew up Catholic my whole life, and I just decided, hey, either God is real or he's not, and I have to engage. And one of the things that I loved about the movie is what you're talking about with Mary, because she was a huge hurdle for me. I was hanging out with a lot of non-Catholics, and they were talking about, why do you Catholics worship Mary? And I really didn't know what we were doing with Mary. but also know that you yourself grew up Catholic like me, and you actually stopped practicing for a while. So can you tell us what happened? Why did you stop practicing? And then why did you begin engaging?
Well, I think it's for a lot of young men at that point. Church was something you did as you grow up, but just like being a boat that is not securely fastened to the shore, you drift. And I think that's what happened. It wasn't like I had any big argument or any big beef with the church. You just drift away, and it was something we did as a family when I was young, but as I grew older in high school, and we had distractions and such, you are an unmoored boat, and you just drift, and that so you drift away on that. Then my dad died when I was 19, and I remember seeing the Reverend Sam Cushing, I think he was a congregational pastor here. He'd gone down to the funeral home, was one of the first to visit my dad's body. And when he came out, he tried to say something to me about God. And of course, I said, what good God would take my dad on that? And so you have that struggle with that, what good God would take your dad. But then a few short years later, it would have been like 4 years, just a few weeks before our daughter was born, our oldest and first child, I had the realization that first I'm going to be a dad, which is something I always wanted to be. And that I realized that God didn't take my dad from me. He gave me my dad. Maybe not as long as I wanted, but he did give me my dad. And that made all the difference. And I realized then that I'm being allowed to share in creation with my wife and through what would be our baby daughter, and that it's God's to give and God's to take. And he gave me a very good father for 19 years, and I learned to be appreciative of that. So that's what brought me back to church. It's a journey. Trust me, I didn't come swooping in, but it was the realization that I was part of something greater than myself.
Well, thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing all of that with our listeners, Clark.
You bet. I appreciated your podcast. I think everybody should get out and see the movie. It starts rough. Like a friend of mine said, some church ladies were affronted by some of the language. But if you really think about the movie in the context of our lives, we all start out rough. But it's how we end that counts.
Amen. So we welcome Mr. Michael Shizmowski, all the way from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, in the Mission Blueprint studio. Say hey.
Hi there. How are you doing today?
Doing well. So, did you see the Father Stu movie?
I did. Yes, I got a chance to see it this last weekend, and I heard a little bit more about it since I kind of caught the end of the time when it was in Sioux Falls, and I've heard a lot of people say it was a little bit of a rough movie to watch, and it's like, well, okay, I'll see how rough it is, but it was definitely very real as far as what you expect to possibly see in a movie that's about a priest. So
it's pretty real, isn't it?
Yeah.
When we think about the priesthood, and you and I know a lot of priests. Mm-hmm. We're in the Diocese of Sioux Falls. In the Diocese of Sioux Falls, we have a lot of great guys.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of great priests.
Yep.
A lot of masculine priests.
Yeah.
And when you think about the priesthood, what we experience isn't a rough and tough and unpolished man.
Right.
Now, I don't know what happens when they're alone with their other brother priests and how they're talking, probably more like you and I.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start watching Father Stu, you go, whoa, this is the guy?
Yeah. yeah, it's where it. I mean, even just jumping to the end. Of course, the ending is very, very, very powerful and very. Hopefully, it's what you hopefully expected in the movie, but to see how people are attracted to people like that or priests that are like that, because I don't know. It seems like they end up being more drawn to somebody that's a little more down to earth and vulnerable, if you want to say it, to the lay people, because you sometimes end up thinking, yeah, priests have to be very proper and poised, and they're very, I don't know, organized and very, I mean, there's a lot of things that I've heard about priests that people just almost think that they're different from us, but it's like, no, they're not. They're the same human being we are. We're all kind of looking towards that end goal in life, but their vocation's just a little bit different. So that's where it was kind of interesting to see Father Stu's path from being a boxer through trying to make it, because the boxing thing didn't work out, into acting, I think, was part of it, and selling groceries, whatever he was doing in that middle time, and then what kind of led him to become interested in practicing the faith, and then pushing that even further into a clergy. So,
well, he's a type of St. Augustine, isn't he?
Yeah.
So for those who don't know much about St. Augustine of Hippo, he his mom's name was Monica. St. Monica.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah, that sounds right. Yep.
I wasn't prepared to talk about St. Augustine.
You're doing good.
His mom prayed for her son. She had a couple boys, but his mom, Monica, prayed for him for almost 30 years for his conversion. He was not a Christian like his mom. He was in love with a woman, decided to make a baby with her without getting married, and liked his life, didn't want to change. Well, after about 30 years of her praying for him, he somehow heard the gospel message, and he said, okay, Lord, I'll come, but not quite yet. I still like my lifestyle. I'm not ready to give this up.
Right.
And St. Augustine is a type of, or Father Stu is a type of St. Augustine. Mm-hmm. He's real. He's honest. This is where I've been. And this is really who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly right. And that's what I think we need a lot more of that in this time in our world, where I feel like a lot of things we come encounter with are just kind of fake and almost a little too superficial, where it's like, okay, you start reading into people or things like that. And it's just almost refreshing to see people even just recently act that way and not be afraid to just be who they are. It's just who he was, and he was just a rough, not the polished individual you expect, but hey, God loves everybody. So,
and people are attracted to that.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting when you think about our media, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, how many years ago did our media turn from a polished program to shows like Survival?
Yeah.
Or Survivor.
Yeah. Survivor, yep.
And all of a sudden it became the human experience, because people were tired of a plastic, polished show. And in many ways, I think the priesthood and businesses can be like that. Mm-hmm. It's just they create this appearance that's not real. And really, that's a Pharisee spirit.
Yeah.
The Pharisees had this appearance. They had beautiful robes, phylacteries on their head. Some of them had bigger ones. And it was all about how they are perceived. Yeah. But the human heart wants a real human experience. And I think that's why the Father Stu movie is such a big hit. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's almost the reality TV that you're talking about. It's like
reality TV.
Yeah. Everybody was getting sick of the sitcoms and the predictability of those, where, we just want something that's a little more real life. And unfortunately, we must not get enough of that in our own lives to watch it on TV too. But it's like, it seemed like, you get kind of into that mode where you wanted to see something original and authentic, and that's something Father Stu definitely was not afraid of showing.
In the confessional, he's trying to tell this priest that he had messed up, but he used other words. And and the priest knew what he said, but he kept saying vulgar words to describe that he had messed up. Not only was it funny, it was honest. He wasn't faking. And the priest said, well, maybe try to clear up some of that vulgarity.
Yeah. Well, that's first thing we work on is just your language. We'll go from there. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Was there a certain scene in that movie that just really hit you in the heart?
Actually, the scene that kind of still strikes me the fondest was when he's sitting in the bar, and it's kind of in that mode. I think that right in that time where he was trying to decide, get married or go to the priesthood. And the gentleman he was talking to in the bar was drinking water that night. And he thought this guy was just crazy. And he was talking to him about various things. And I mean, that's where I can't honestly remember exactly what they talked about. But after this guy leaves, he asked the bartender, Father Stu asked the bartender what the guy was drinking, because he thought he was on something. He was drunk or whatever. And bartender said, just water. And it's like, okay. So this gentleman is sitting there in the bar, and he has no idea where he came from, who he is. And it's like, okay, you wonder who that was now after you think about it. So that's kind of one of those things where it's like, how many times in our own lives do we come across people, if it's even to somebody we know on a regular basis, sometimes those moments you kind of wonder, okay, what just happened, or why are they telling us this right now? So, I mean, it's like you come across Jesus in your daily life without recognizing it. So I think even the fact that we don't recognize that in our lives enough to really get a feel for that Jesus is present, no matter what we're doing, where we're at in our lives, how we're feeling, what we're saying. It's like, you got to keep that, kind of be aware. So I think being aware is kind of a piece of that movie that I don't know if a lot of people took away from it, but being aware of what God is calling us to be and do is a piece that I overall kind of brought. But that was that scene that I I think about a little bit more than the rest. So
awareness is so key.
Yeah,
I totally agree with what you're saying. Now, listeners, think about this for a second. Has there been a time in your life where you met somebody, maybe a man, maybe a woman, and whether they said something to you or not, you had an experience, and you've always kind of remembered, it's tucked in the back of your mind, but somehow God was doing something with that person, or it was God himself, or it was an angel.
Right.
Heaven sent someone to you. See, this happened to me when I was 10 years old.
Sure.
I was loved by a priest. Something was coming off of his body and touching me. And it was the Holy Spirit of God. But as a 10-year-old, who's going to know what that is?
Right.
And it touched me so much, I ended up weeping. And I remember weeping, thinking, why am I crying? Well, God used that priest in the way he loved me to impart his Holy Spirit upon me. And that was a moment in time I still remember what time of day it was. I remember going out to the haystacks. I remember crying. I remember my brother asking me, what are you crying about, after I came back? So there are moments and times where God does send people, maybe even himself. Now, that bar scene, the guy sort of looked like Jesus, don't you think?
Yeah, that's where, after you watch it, and you probably go back and watch it again someday, it's like, oh yeah.
One of the things I love about the movie is the word vocation. Vocare means to be called into, right?
Yeah.
It's a Latin word.
Yep.
He had no idea, as a 10-year-old boy, he's going to be a Roman Catholic priest. He wanted to be a movie star.
Yeah.
Ends up becoming a boxer, falls in love. He gets baptized in the church. He takes his shirt off and he's showing off. And some of the people in the congregation are shaking their heads like, what is this guy doing? And he's kind of showing off, looking at his girlfriend. Here I go. I'm doing this for you, baby. He's just really real and really honest.
Yep.
Something happened when those waters touched his head, right? And all of a sudden, he's thinking about becoming a priest. Just like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think what's really good about this movie is when young men see it and see how honest he was and how God can use a guy like that, Certainly, maybe he could use a guy like me even.
Right. Well, that's the thing is that, yeah, I mean, you don't think of yourself in those situations to take somebody that's, if you want to quote unquote, broken or even just so rough, and I mean that kind of mentality, and then they turn into somebody who's very holy and very, very spiritual, but a very good witness of the faith. I mean, it's somebody that's struggled through life, but then it's came out that way. You don't really understand what your calling is until it's like kind of like that moment when Jesus shows up in your life for some strange reason, and you just kind of think, am I supposed to be here or not? Or what is this? Where am I at? Where am I in life? What am I supposed to be doing? And vocation is always something that I have always kind of figured out, like, okay, where am I at? I mean, I'm in a different job right now than I was 5 years ago. And it's like, okay, is this the path I'm supposed to be on, or am I supposed to be doing something otherwise?
Father Roger Gaditz is sort of a Father Stu to me.
Okay, sure.
I met Father Roger. He's actually from my hometown. All of us thought he was weird because he was so in love with Jesus. Really, we thought he was just strange. And he had all this joy, right?
Yeah.
What I love about Father Roger Gaditz is he's real. He's honest. Mm-hmm. He says it the way it is, usually out of love, almost always out of love.
Sure.
But he's real with you. He's honest. He doesn't hide who he is. And he has been huge in my walk with Christ because I want to emulate Christ, and Father Roger is my human guide. So for you, Michael, has there been a priest that you met or that you know that sort of emulates the Father Stu-ness, if you will, the realness of a man?
Sure. Well, even honestly right now, Father Tom Hartman, who we've got at St. Michael's now, he's somebody I've known for a long time because being from Millbank, and I've lived in Millbank at one time. I've known him through his days as basically a husband and father to 2 kids, and he worked at the family's grocery store, so I saw him there, and he helped at church a lot, and so I've kind of seen him through his different phases, and now he's a priest in Sioux Falls.
Okay, hold on. What you're saying is Father Hartman was married once?
Yes.
Oh, so he's married. He was married.
Yep.
And he had 2 kids.
Yes.
And then what happened?
So then they ended up divorcing while the kids were young, so he raised the 2 kids and got them through high school and into college, got them out of college, and then he kind of during that high school college years, he was starting to discern becoming a priest.
No kidding.
So so it's kind of an interesting, I mean, a very, not similar, a very like exact pattern to Father Stu, but somebody who was almost on one path that shifted over to clergy. So, or the vocations like that. So
he got an annulment.
Yep.
Went into the seminary.
Yep.
Was ordained a priest.
Yep. Exactly.
And now he's the pastor of St. Michael's in Sioux Falls.
Yes. Yep.
And I suspect that people really like him.
Yeah. Yep. That's where, I mean, that's if somebody who just visits the parish and they kind of read about him or find out about him. Yeah, there's some things that people, I'm sure, question. But at the same time, it's like, what a perfect person to relate to families and relate to single people, relate to brother priests. And I mean, so he's a very down-to-earth individual, a great guy. And it's definitely been fun to see him through that process because knowing him for how many years? I mean, he was a youth director for when I was in high school. So it's kind of quite the way to turn the tables. But yeah, the parish does love him. So definitely a good witness. So,
what do people love most about the priesthood?
Well, I feel like, you know what, if it's kind of a lead by example. If you find somebody, even if it's not a priest, but priests especially, if you find somebody like a priest that you just kind of almost, I don't know, connect with on some level. I mean, I think that's this to, just to be infectious. I mean, anybody that wants a faith, wants to live like that. I mean, even if you're a single person, married, you're retired, whatever. I mean, whatever stage of life you're in, just leading by example, seeing somebody that lives like that.
St. Paul says you have to be all things to all people.
Yeah.
And I think what St. Paul is really referring to is you have to be yourself. You can't be fake.
Yeah, right.
You can't put on your garb and your phylacteries and create this appearance that you're holy. We see right through it. Mm-hmm. And we really are blessed in the Diocese of Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
Final takeaway from the movie.
I would say with this movie, it's kind of one of those things where you just that realism, the real lost for words here. Yeah, the authenticity of who he was and the individual that he came from to grow into. I think that's a good message for anybody, because no matter where you're at in life, if you are that hardcore Catholic, if you want to call it that, that's doing everything you can, spending time in adoration, going to church on a daily basis, of course weekly, confession, you're doing all the sacraments. But if you're not, it's okay. You still have a faith. You still believe in the true God. There's a lot of things that we will mess up on, but that's where we're lucky that somebody will still love us. So he's a great example of true love and what true love looks like. And I feel like he's definitely somebody to look up to. So.
Well, thanks for listening to the Glen Gauer podcast. We will be back next week, and thank you to Clark for calling in and Michael coming to the studio.
No problem.
Hey, have a great week, everybody. Hey, thanks for listening to the Glen Gauer podcast, sponsored by Mission Blueprint. Mission Blueprint is a nonprofit ministry started by Glen and Jamie to sanctify the family. Our income is donation-based, and we need your help. Please support us financially by going to www.mission-blueprint.org and be a part of our financial team. Thank you, and may God strengthen the bars of your gate.